let's take a deep dive into Scripture with Father John Worgul and Danny Gallagher. During each episode, we'll be sharing our insights about the Bible passages presented on a related post on Father John's website, ancienthopes.org. To find the post we're discussing, go to the ancienthopes.org website and search for the title of this podcast using the search box on that page. Our discussions on this show will follow the posts listed on the ancienthopes.org website. Here are your hosts for our deep dive into Scripture today, Danny and Father John. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Deep Dive into Scripture, our podcast and radio show. I'm Danny Gallagher, hosting today with Father John Worgul, who is back in the studio. Welcome back, Father John. Good to have you here.
Well, thank you. Yeah, today this is a big deal, okay, because we're bringing something to conclusion here that we've been working on since, I don't know, October when we started this whole thing.
I know, it's crazy. This is the 31st episode, I think, of Deep Dive, these podcasts. Things seem to be coming to a close here, as you said, this idea of primeval history, and there's a lot packed into this post. So I suggest everybody go on ancienthopes.org and read this thing, because as I read it, I got really lost in all of the...
Is it because I'm that bad of a writer?
No. I just got really lost in all the references and the stories, because everything, this is what you did, right? It's the end. So you brought everything together and are trying to tie everything up. So it was difficult for me to just understand totally.
Things clear.
Well, that's what we're going to try.
If that doesn't happen by the end of this post, we can just, I don't know what we'll do.
We'll throw it away and we'll do it again. No, we won't do that. Okay. So anyway, let's have you go ahead and start and try and work that out.
I just think that we have to know the basic structure of the primeval history. First two chapters, we know what those are. Those are the creation narrative.
Yes.
Right. And then chapters 3 into chapters 6, we have the first part of the primeval history which we called, you love that word, right?
Antediluvian.
The antediluvians.
Right.
Those
before the flood.
Lived before the flood, right? And then after that, we have the post-diluvians with Noah and his descendants, ending up with Shem. He's not one of the Three Stooges, okay?
Yes, right. That joke is old now. Yeah.
Okay, right. Who is ultimately the father of Abraham, okay?
Right.
The Semitic people, especially with Abraham being the culmination of that line.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And so we have the antediluvians, post-diluvians, and we have to look at sort of patterns, right? I mean, with the antediluvians, we have Cain and his descendants, and we see what goes on with that, where evil gets progressively worse and worse and worse.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And then there's judgment.
Right. God has to do something about it, because he sees that no matter what's happening, it's not getting better. Like, it never gets any better. Things continue to devolve.
Right. It's not just that. It's that what he created good became, remember that word? Shachat.
Oh, yes.
It became rotten.
The spitting word.
You can't live with shachat. Okay.
Yes, right.
God can't live with it. And we can't live with it either, because it's what it is. It's complete chaos.
Yes.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And so then you have a start over with Noah. And then, of course, we see that there's a line with him, okay, with Nimrod. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, which ends up with Babel.
Yes. Right.
Okay. So anyways, I got kind of, well, what should we say? There's a story, this ancient medieval story about Faust. And I think most of us know something about it, right?
Right. I'd certainly heard of it before. Now, when did that story sort of show up in history?
Well, it was basically Christopher Marlowe, okay, who, I can't remember. I think he might be like a 15th century British poet, playwright. But he's building on something that goes way back into the Middle Ages.
Sure, yeah.
And so Faust, I love this, okay? We can picture him in this Gothic cell, ribbed with arches, bookcases all around, some stained glass windows. In the bookcases, they're just filled with folios, with vellum backs, and everything. I mean, you could
got that smell. It's got that library,
musty library smell.
That's it.
And we see him in there with a candle, and he studies all the time. He knows all the books. He's a polymath. He knows everything there is to know. Mm-hmm. But he's not happy.
Yeah.
It's not fulfilling for him.
He's missing out on something, he feels like.
Yeah, there is something missing out. Then, of course, his eye goes over to the occult section in his library. He starts looking through that. And then he eventually calls up a demon.
Okay.
Mephistopheles.
Yeah, tough name to say, but good job.
Most of these names are really tough names to say. Right. And so what he tries to do is, what he does, he basically signs in blood a
kind of contract.
A contract, right. Yeah. And this is it. For 20 years, he'll be able to know everything possible to know and to do things that no normal person could do,
Yeah.
Okay. And at the end of 20 years, his soul will go to the devil.
Yeah. Wow.
Right.
What a mistake.
Well, he's thinking that he might be able to outsmart the devil.
Okay. Yeah. Well, he's really smart and knows a lot about everything.
Right. So for 20 years, he learns the secrets of nature. He can have this out-of-body experience where he's at the poles of the earth and understand all the forces of nature. Mm-hmm. And he also can play tricks. Like he goes into the Pope's private chambers and tickles him and does various things to annoy him, right?
Yeah,
so but you can tell that even with all of this, he's bored. Okay. So what does he do? He asks for the ultimate. He wants Helen of Troy. Okay. And of course, Christopher Marlowe is very poetic.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thou art fairer than the evening fair, clad in the beauty of 1,000 stars. Go home and tell Doris that.
Yeah.
She'll probably roll her eyes.
Or slap me.
Yeah.
Wake up. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, what do you want? Yeah, that sort of thing. So anyways, the poetry is beautiful, Christopher Marlowe, and then that sort of thing. But everybody, this would be a play, okay? So everybody who's at the play would be sitting at the edge of their seats because everyone knows that if he actually has Helen, that he's not really Helen because Helen's dead. Helen is really a demon.
Wow.
Okay, so everybody knew that, and they knew that if he actually had intercourse with a demon, then his soul would be irrevocably lost. I mean, up to that point, maybe he could outsmart the devil, but they know when he does this.
Yeah, not after that.
He's done.
Yeah, crossed the line.
He crossed the line, right? Yeah, so anyways, as we see, Mephistopheles comes to him and says, do you really want to do this? And that's the tension of the story.
Yeah.
And he says, yes, I want Helen of Troy.
So he's given that little tidbit and saying, do you really want? Yeah.
Okay. So this is sort of like, I think, the Western myth in some ways. Mm-hmm. Because the Western myth, it really has to do, especially since the industrial age, has to do with production.
Yeah, right.
Okay. It has to do with science. It has to do with insatiable lust for knowledge, which never really satisfies.
Right, the technology. Yeah.
Right, right.
You're listening to the Deep Dive into Scripture radio show and podcast with your hosts, Danny Gallagher and Father John Worgul. The text that we're discussing can be found on the ancienthopes.org website. Then use the search box to find the post with the same title as this podcast. Let's get back to our show with Danny and Father John.
It has to do with science. It has to do with this insatiable lust for knowledge, which never really satisfies.
Right. The technology. Yeah.
Right. Right. And you would think that with all the rationalism, that occultic type things would be shoved away and say, oh, that's something that belongs to the ignorant past or whatever.
Yeah. Ancient history. Kind of, we're better than this now.
Right. But now the occult is just flourishing like it never has before, because humans aren't a machine. They want something spiritual, and they're not. A lot of them are not finding, God forbid, in the church. And so now we, with our technology, with everything, we find that we are actually in bed with the devil.
Yeah.
We've sort of sold our souls to the devil to just get Helen. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Well, this is replicated from what we see in the scriptures, because when you have Cain, you got Cain's line. Remember how technological it was?
Yeah. They were creating all kinds of things that had never been.
Insatiable desire for culture, metalworking, music, all that sort of thing. And in the end, they end up with demons cohabitating with women. It gets so bad. Okay. It's kind of like they sold their souls to the devil.
Yeah.
And then you've got the post-diluvians that starts out with Ham, and Nimrod. Nimrod's the builder of cities, right?
Yeah.
And he's associated with a culture that was created in the alluvial plain of Sumer, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you've got the Tower of Babel, which we talked about last time, which is really an occult tower, and where humans actually
from the underworld to the heavens,
right,
movement between,
right, and so you find humans intercoursing with demons, so to speak, right? And God doesn't destroy the world because He promised Noah that He would never do that again, right? And so we have everything culminating with Babel, but out of that, God has a holy line, and that's the line of Shem, which takes you to Abraham, and so next post, we're going to start talking about what we call the patriarchal narrative, the second half of the book of Genesis. But it's really important to know that without the first primeval history, you will never understand Abraham and the patriarchal history. And even beyond, you'll never understand Scripture. So all the motifs we've talked about, all the patterns of going from creation, the pattern of creation going from chaos to order to rest, and then the counterflow of going from rest to disorder to chaos.
Yeah.
These two forces are always at work, but God is always winning in the whole thing.
Sure.
Right.
And that's really obvious in this whole history. That is one thing that I was able to really understand and see, through all of these posts that we've gone through in these podcasts, that is always at work. And God is always trying to straighten things out, moving in the earth and the way that it's going.
Yeah. And so what humans do by their own effort is for their own glory. Okay. Whether it's Cain's line, building the culture, or with Ham's line that really comes to a critical point with Babel.
Yeah.
It's made with man's hands.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's one part of the stories, so you're bringing all these stories together. There's one part of the story where you said that the temple, though it was made with human hands, which means that it's sort of for human glory, it would be, it's not, because the way that it was made was the stones were formed in another place and put together with no sound.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
The meaning of that? Because that really was intriguing to me. I know that's sort of just a side issue.
No, it's not a side issue, because we're going to come back to it certainly when we talked about the tabernacle and the temple. Because what we lost at the fall was Eden. And Eden, we know, was a holy mountain, and mountains are always associated with temples. Temple mountain motif. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
And so when that's lost to us. Humans want to rebuild that, because every heart aches, no matter who we are, for lost origins. Okay, somehow we all know as a human memory that there was something that was good.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And beautiful. Yeah.
And beautiful. Right. And so humanity basically bends all its powers to create this, but they do it with human hands. Babel was made with human hands.
Right. So even though it was probably a beautiful thing that was rising, it was just for the wrong purpose.
Well, the purpose was trying to get back to the garden, but in an autonomous state. I mean, the only way to get back is to get realigned with your creator instead of, and basically bowing to the creator rather than doing this like they did, which was what? Let us make for ourselves a name.
Right. Yes.
Fame, that sort of thing.
It's for their own glory.
For their own glory, right. So that's what humans do. We're always building things for our own glory, which is Babel.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. Yeah, and in contrast to this, God will give Abraham, he'll bring him to the land, which is, as we shall see, a return to lost origins.
Okay. Yeah.
And then once you get in the land, well, even before that, because in the book of Exodus, we'll see that God will inhabit the land and be with them within the context of a tabernacle.
Okay. Yeah.
And so,
right. Oh, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, this is made with human hands, but it's built by a vision that Moses saw.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And the builders were inspired by God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But even so, it was built by human hands, so therefore it's temporal.
Okay.
Same thing with the temple.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You'll see that, as you said, the stones were made in the quarry to the exact size.
Right, because everything was laid out. I mean, if you look at that scripture passage, then it lays out exactly how the temple is to be built.
So when they laid the blocks in, it was in silence. No sound of a hammer or anything.
Yeah.
Okay? Because in God's presence, there's absolute silence. Silence in some way is the language of God, okay, as opposed to the cacophony of noise that humans always make, right? Right. And all the noise that, well, you've been on a construction site, right?
Sure.
That's unholy.
Yeah, true. There's a lot going on.
Right. But a temple is something different. Mm-hmm. But still, even then it was made by human hands. And so that means it was temporal, okay, even though, as we shall see, the people of Israel thought it wasn't. They thought that they were safe, that this is going to be something that'll last forever.
Yeah.
Without even thinking that, well, maybe if I rebel, that maybe God's going to destroy this place,
Mm-hmm.
So throughout all the prophecies and everything going in the New Testament, we're looking forward to something that was built without human hands.
Yeah.
And we are living in it right now in the kingdom of God.
Mm-hmm.
It's spreading silently. The world's making all this noise, building their Babels.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But we live in something that will last forever.
Yeah.
We're built upon the rock of Jesus Christ,
mm-hmm.
the cornerstone of the true building of God. So we have the human race who are very willing in the end to sell their souls to the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people who will be irrevocably damned. I mean, it's a terrifying thought, but it's true. Okay.
Yeah.
We have free wills and we can do whatever we want with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to those who look to their creator, look to be in relationship with them. And that's the whole point of the patriarchal narratives. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And God's not just out there somewhere, but he actually enters into personal relationship with people.
And connects.
Yeah. So
good. Okay. So that's next.
Yep. That's next. And so Danny, I don't know. Did I clear up anything in this?
You did. There were a lot of questions, but again, I really suggest that people go look at the post because that's got a lot of references to different things that are all that you bring all together to bring together this idea of primeval history and bring it to a nice close.
I hope so.
Yeah, good. Okay, good.
God bless.
Thanks a lot for coming in. See you next time on Deep Dive into Scripture. Thanks for listening. Please go to ancienthopes.org and the Books of the Bible links on that page for related posts from Father John. You can find more episodes of this show on the WSJF podcast server or on the Apple and Spotify podcast services. See you next time when we take another deep dive into Scripture. Don't forget this week to open that Bible and dive right in.